like I'm caught up in your trap again.
Bruce Springsteen once stood at the very top of the world, embodying the flawless image of the ultimate working-class hero.
It never stops. I mean,
never?
No, of course not. That's life. You know, life. It's that way till you go into the box.
But behind those dazzling stage lights lay an expensive secret, buried for decades. His brief first marriage to actress Julianne Phillips once consumed countless pages of the international press. It was far more than $1 million breakup between two people from completely different worlds. Behind closed doors were brutal inner conflicts, a bitter marital agreement, and a dark secret that the rock legend himself would only find the courage to confront many years later. In 1985, Bruce Springsteen entered married life as a global superstar, only to find himself quickly facing severe psychological turmoil. Soon after the honeymoon, the singer began experiencing prolonged waves of panic and an escalating sense of anxiety. Although Julianne Phillips consistently showed genuine care, the invisible distance between them continued to widen as Springsteen deliberately withdrew into himself to conceal the instability inside. A fear of deep emotional attachment, combined with an obsession with losing control over his own life, began to dominate the rock star's thinking. This condition soon developed into a pattern of quietly self-destructive behavior within the relationship. During family dinners, Bruce repeatedly struggled with negative thoughts, convincing himself that his young wife had entered the marriage only to take advantage of his fame and the extraordinary success of his music career. Even though he understood how irrational his own thinking had become, the singer could not stop the rise of these corrosive suspicions. Springsteen later reflected on those painful dinners. Julianne loved me and had no malice or intention of taking advantage of me. But at the time, I had drifted so far from reality that I was completely powerless to keep myself grounded in the truth. This relentless inner torment pushed him into a state of complete emotional isolation. Searching for a way out, the leader of the E Street Band began secretly attending therapy sessions with Dr. Wayne Myers in New York. The hours-long trips continued as Bruce tried to control the panic attacks and understand the roots of his fear. Psychoanalytic sessions suggested that his present conflicts were deeply connected to childhood psychological wounds and an unconscious fixation on the fractured family life he had known in the past. Treatment helped him identify the problem, but it could not immediately repair the distance growing inside the home. Unable to find common ground in real life, the artist born in 1949 poured his confusion and inner crisis into the recording studio. In the spring of 1987, the album Tunnel of Love was created largely in his private studio in New Jersey, almost like a precise surgical record of an emotional collapse. In sharp contrast to the energetic atmosphere of his earlier work, the new songs carried subdued melodies and explored the darker corners of a man's mind while he found himself trapped inside a failing marriage. The album became the vehicle through which Springsteen expressed fractures he could not directly put into words with his wife. Brilliant Disguise stood at the center of the record, laying bare his self-doubt and his fear of the disguises people use to conceal who they really are. The song authentically reflected the unstable movement between trust and suspicion that Bruce experienced every day. One Step Up followed with a portrayal of suffocating routines, emotional dead ends, and the cold silence increasingly dominating the relationship between husband and wife. His anguish over a divided sense of self emerged even more deeply in Two Faces, where the narrator exposes two opposing identities: a warm man struggling to preserve his family, and a cold stranger constantly searching for a way to escape commitment. When Tunnel of Love was officially released in October 1987, critics and listeners quickly recognized that this was neither a work of fiction nor a romantic celebration of love. Rather than bringing them back together, The album's arrival made it even clearer that the line separating Bruce from his wife had grown dangerously deep. The instability simmering inside him could no longer remain confined to recording studios or private therapy sessions. The distance between the two became increasingly visible to the public, pushing the relationship into upheavals neither of them could fully control. The truths buried behind those somber lyrics gradually began to emerge under the relentless scrutiny of the international press. Confronting the past. After his first marriage ended, Bruce Springsteen maintained almost absolute silence before the media for nearly 3 decades. Building a new family life with Patti Scialfa helped the musician regain stability in both his career and his personal life. Even so, strict legal confidentiality agreements and deliberate silence only covered the surface of an unresolved conflict that had never been fully settled. The star, born in 1949, chose to keep the past private in order to protect those involved while giving himself enough distance to examine his own mistakes with greater seriousness. That long silence was officially broken in September 2016 when his autobiography, Born to Run, was published worldwide. Unlike earlier works that celebrated the glow of his fame, Springsteen devoted many pages to confronting the greatest flaws in his younger self. The musician openly admitted his immaturity and inability to sustain a mature relationship, stating, "I put her in an extremely difficult position for a young woman, and I completely failed as both a husband and a partner." The confession quickly drew major attention from critics and the public because of its directness and refusal to avoid responsibility. In the memoir, Bruce did not use fame or professional pressure to excuse the collapse of the marriage. He openly acknowledged that he himself had been the primary cause of the failure of his first marriage and expressed deep regret over the immature way he behaved at the time. The author emphasized that his poor communication skills and instinct to run from responsibility had caused unnecessary pain to his partner. His growing awareness of his own imperfections is visible throughout the book, revealing the portrait of a music icon willing to confront the most troubling parts of himself in public. The contrast between the young woman's generosity and Bruce's own emotional withdrawal and coldness was presented by him as a costly lesson in maturity. The musician did not hesitate to describe his former self as emotionally disabled, someone who constantly built barriers, instead of learning how to share and understand the person beside him. Following the publication of the autobiography, Springsteen carried these reflections onto the stage through the musical monologue Springsteen on Broadway, which opened in October 2017 in New York. Standing before thousands of people without the support of a grand band arrangement, he repeatedly spoke about his long journey through psychological treatment and the need to use antidepressant medication to maintain emotional balance. The painful lessons from his failed marriage were revisited as reminders of the price of complacency and selfishness, while reinforcing the idea that redemption can only begin when a person is willing to look directly at wounds that remain unhealed. In a series of in-depth interviews afterward, Bruce repeatedly returned to a core truth about intimate relationships that had taken him more than half a lifetime to fully understand. The unresolved fracture between those two opposing worlds had once exploded into a series of scandals that shocked international audiences in the late 1980s. $1 million divorce agreement and the price of fame permanently ended a love story that had once carried enormous expectations. The Rome balcony scandal. Bruce Springsteen's marital crisis officially entered an irreversible public stage during the Tunnel of Love Express tour, which began in early 1988. On international stages, Julianne Phillips was no longer a regular presence, replaced instead by increasingly close interactions between the singer and backing vocalist Patti Scialfa. Although the couple had privately agreed to separate in an effort to avoid media attention, The absence of an official press statement unintentionally placed both of them in an extremely vulnerable position before the dense network of Western entertainment journalists. The crisis reached its breaking point in mid-June 1988 in Rome, Italy, when photographers captured a series of intimate moments between Bruce and Cialfa on a hotel balcony. Images of the musician in casual clothing with his colleague quickly spread across international newspapers and magazines, creating a genuine media earthquake. Because the new relationship became widely public before the separation had been legally announced, the young wife was pushed into the center of public sympathy and speculation, turning the situation into one of the most explosive celebrity scandals of the era. Under enormous public pressure and with the marriage beyond repair, Phillips formally filed for divorce in California State Court on August 30, 1988, citing irreconcilable differences. The legal process moved quickly under strict confidentiality, with top legal teams on both sides working to prevent private information from leaking to the press. By December 1988, a confidential property settlement had been reached, with the payment estimated at approximately $16 million under California community property law, before the court formally finalized the divorce on March 1, 1989. A central provision of the legal settlement was a strict confidentiality clause binding both parties. Contrary to media predictions of bitter public conflict in the press, the young woman maintained complete silence, rejecting both exclusive interview offers and enormous publishing fees. When she appeared publicly to promote the film Skin Deep, the actress offered only a brief statement about her principle of keeping her personal life private, and firmly refused to make any comment about her former husband. After the highly publicized marital upheaval, Julianne devoted her energy to rebuilding an independent acting career in Hollywood. Her greatest success came when she was cast as Frankie Reed in the popular NBC drama series Sisters. The relatively quiet conclusion of this noisy divorce left many questions about the origins of a brief but turbulent romance. Before facing their public collapse in Europe, two people from completely different worlds had once experienced an intense beginning at the very height of global music fame. The fateful meeting. The relationship between Bruce Springsteen and Julianne Phillips began to take shape after a chance meeting in October 1984, backstage at a concert in Los Angeles. Booking agent Barry Bell served as the person who introduced them, believing that the young woman's grounded personality made her very different from the more extravagant culture of the entertainment world. At the time, the 35-year-old man was at the height of global fame, while the 24-year-old model and actress was only beginning to find early success through television films such as His Mistress and Summer Fantasy. Phillips's simplicity and educational background quickly made a strong impression on the singer. Their connection developed around a striking contrast in background and lifestyle. Springsteen represented the rugged image of an artist shaped by the working-class streets of New Jersey, living privately and closely tied to street-level rock music. Julianne, by contrast, had grown up in a well-educated and financially secure family in Lake Oswego, Oregon, and had already become a highly sought-after model represented by the prestigious Elite Model Agency. In spite of the 11-year age difference and the very different environments in which they had grown up, the two quickly found common ground through a shared passion for classic rock. The romance progressed at remarkable speed after only a few weeks together. The musician brought his girlfriend to meet his extended family on the East Coast during the year-end holiday season before traveling with her to Oregon to meet her family in February 1985. Phillips then accompanied the rock star on a major tour in Japan, and the two later spent a vacation together in Hawaii. After only 6 months of dating, Bruce proposed to her on the balcony of his Laurel Canyon home, officially laying the foundation for their plans to build a life together. The major event quickly became one of the hottest targets for the American entertainment press. The wedding was originally scheduled for May 15, 1985, but the plan was immediately exposed after a local flower shop inadvertently disclosed information to reporters. As hundreds of journalists and photographers flooded into the small town of Lake Oswego, the couple was forced to move the ceremony 2 days earlier in an effort to preserve its dignity and privacy. The wedding took place shortly after midnight on May 13, 1985, at Our Lady of the Lake Catholic Church, after the local priest received special approval from the diocese. To ensure the highest possible level of security, around 40 guests, including producer John Landau and groomsmen Steve Van Zandt and Clarence Clemens, were first assembled in the parking lot of a nearby high school, before being secretly transported by vehicle to the church under the cover of darkness. The groom wore an elegant dark blue suit beside the radiant bride in a classic floor-length white lace wedding gown adorned with gardenias. The lightning-fast beginning and the violent flashes surrounding their wedding night could not conceal the deeper fractures rooted in the past. Far beneath the dazzling summit of fame, the psychological wounds carried by the man at the center of the rock world remained quietly present, waiting for a moment to break through. The foundation of his early life. The roots of the psychological fractures and the later collapse reached back to Bruce Springsteen's childhood in Long Branch, New Jersey. Born into a working-class family, young Bruce grew up under the oppressive shadow of his father, Douglas "Dutch" Springsteen, a man who suffered from bipolar disorder and severe depression. The family atmosphere was often filled with heavy silence, tension, and sudden eruptions of anger, creating a home that lacked emotional security. Those childhood wounds helped form a deeply ingrained defense mechanism in Springsteen's personality, a tendency to remain guarded and to destroy close relationships himself before anyone else could hurt him. Music appeared as his only form of rescue, becoming a way for the young man to escape a harsh reality and search for a voice of his own. Old guitars and simple early melodies became a safe refuge, sheltering an anxious inner life from the instability around him. His journey toward establishing himself as an artist began through exhausting nights of performance in seaside bars around Asbury Park. Springsteen joined and led local bands, including the Castile's Child and Steel Mill, sharpening his live performance skills and stage confidence night after night in front of demanding working-class audiences. Persistence and relentless effort helped the young musician attract the attention of legendary producer John Hammond, opening the door to an official recording contract with the prestigious Columbia Records. In 1973, his first two albums, Greetings from Asbury Park, NJ, and The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle, were released to the public. Although critics praised the poetic quality of his songwriting, the disappointing commercial performance of those records placed Bruce's young career in serious danger. Pressure to prove his financial value to the label forced the musician and the E Street Band to pour nearly all of their energy and resources into the next project. The historic turning point arrived in August 1975 with the release of Born to Run, which ignited a nationwide cultural phenomenon across the United States. The record placed Springsteen's face on the covers of both Time and Newsweek in the same week, establishing him as one of the defining musical figures of a new generation. Stories about escaping dead-end towns and longing for freedom struck directly at the emotional world of millions of working-class young Americans, turning the New Jersey musician into a cultural symbol of national significance. At the same time, the summit of fame came with a profound emotional decline, as the shadow of loneliness increasingly closed around him. The 1982 album Nebraska marked a deliberate retreat from the commercial machine, reflecting a bleak, raw mood and some of his darkest reflections on human existence. Soon afterward, the worldwide explosion of Born in the USA in June 1984 placed Bruce at the very highest level of global rock stardom. While stripping away much of his remaining privacy, and pushing him into a serious state of disorientation. The title, The Boss and the Adoration of Millions of Fans, could not fill the emotional emptiness inside him or heal the inherited shadows associated with his father. Extraordinary commercial success turned the 35-year-old man into a nearly perfect public symbol, while beneath that image remained a personality carrying deep wounds that had never been fully resolved. The brilliance of the stage became an unintended screen behind which his inability to build and maintain a stable family life remained hidden. The collision between worldwide fame and unresolved childhood wounds created a complicated foundation for the singer's private life. Looking back at Bruce Springsteen's journey, we can see that even the greatest icons must struggle with psychological wounds and the painful lessons of emotional maturity. The story of his first marriage is not simply a somber note in the career of the boss, but also powerful evidence that forgiveness and the courage to confront past mistakes can become the beginning of genuine redemption. If you believe these hidden chapters of history and these detailed portraits of public figures offer meaningful insight, please press like, share this video with others who may be interested, and do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you will not miss the compelling behind-the-scenes music stories still to come. What do you think about Bruce Springsteen's courage in admitting his own mistakes after so many decades? Leave your thoughts and feelings in the comments below.